Hey guys, welcome to my channel. This time we're gonna look at this beautiful palette from Give Me Glow Cosmetics. It's called Hunted Pumpkin. I was finally able to get my hands on this. I'm from Europe, so I shop these indie brands from a website called Monolith Shop. So if you live in the EU, definitely check it out. I will link their site down in the description. I've wanted this palette since Halloween of last year when this came out. I was so sad when it sold out and I didn't get my hands on this, but then I've heard that it will come to Europe, so I had to buy it. I probably won't be using it as much right now, and I will wait for autumn season, but I wanted to play with it and create at least 4 looks to kind of dip my hands in this and find out if I like this formula, because this is my first time using Give Me Glow Cosmetics, so I wanted to find out what the quality is like, how these shadows perform. A little bit about me: I love indie brands, I love eyeshadows, so I mainly focus on the eyeshadows. I try to collect indie brands, especially if it's interesting color story with great packaging and obviously a great quality. So here you can see some swatches. First thing, when this came in my mail, I didn't realize how incredibly large this palette is. It's almost even bigger than my Ace Beauty Tropical Vibes palette, and that's like 18 pan palette, I think. This only has 10 shades, and they're enormous. They're even larger. The pans of these eyeshadows are even larger than the lower palette from Unearthly Cosmetics, and I thought those are really large. So it's really big palette. It's pretty heavy actually, which I was kind of slightly sad about because it doesn't have a lot of shades, and at least 4 of those are neutral. That was kind of disappointing to me, especially since there are only 3 shimmers, and I personally prefer either to have more shimmers in the palette than there are mattes, or I like it to be half and half. So, which obviously this is something that I knew when I was buying it. I just wish that either this palette was smaller or they could add one more like shimmer shade. Something that's that could be used as an inner corner highlight would be nice, because there isn't really any inner corner highlight. That's a little bit disappointing, and I feel like the first and the last shade of the first row are kind of too similar. I mean, one of them is darker, but I don't think that the first shade in the top corner, the Starless and Somber, I don't think it needed to be there, or at least I would definitely live my life happily ever after if this wasn't there, and I wouldn't notice it missing. I love the extremely neon-y orange shade. I think that one is amazing, and I love the kind of reddish shimmer. This palette definitely goes pretty cool toned on me. Unless you're using the orange and the red, it's gonna be all pretty cool toned with the kind of teals and the almost blue shades, and the browns and the neutrals are a little bit more cool toned as well. Even the neutral shimmer goes quite cool, at least on me. So that's kind of a little bit of a quick review about this palette. We're gonna take a look at the first look that I created. I had to play with these oranges. I love orange. I think orange is a really fun color, so I had to try it. And also it was really sunny the day I was creating this look, so I just had to. Firstly, I used this really neon-y orange shade called Follow My Shadow. I used my BeautyBay eye primer base. I used this base for all the looks except the last look, because these shadows, especially the matte shadows, are really creamy, and I feel like because the BeautyBay eyeshadow base is a little bit more thicker and like it has more body to it, I feel like the mattes just really stick to it, but they were really hard to blend out. So on the last look I tried to see if it's the shadow's fault or the base's fault. So they're extremely creamy. They seem extremely pigmented the first time you put them on the eyes. They really stick. you get a lot of pigment, but I found that they're really hard to blend out. It's very visible where your skin ends and where the shadow starts, and it's really hard to create this like gradient. Also, if you're then putting on darker shades and you're trying to build the color, it's either extremely dark but patchy, or if you try to blend it out, it kind of loses its opacity. So that's what I was a little bit sad about, that the looks always looked really dramatic in the beginning, but then when you try to blend it out, they kind of sheared out. So that's a little bit of a issue, but if you like a little bit more neutral looks, I guess it won't be as much of a problem. Then when I blended this orange, I used the shade Do Not Carve, which is a really deep brown shade, and I use it in my outer corner. Then on the lid, I put the shade Pumpkin Possessions, which is this shimmery orangey red shade. I used NYX's glitter primer to see how it's gonna stick, and then in my inner corner as a highlighter I used the shade Serpent from the Lord palette, and I also put a little bit of the shade Griffin, which is orangey shade. I finished this look using L'Oreal Pro XXL mascara. I will link it down below. And I was feeling really fancy that day, so I used foundation and other makeup. So I used the Maybelline Fit Me Matte and Poreless Primer and Rimmel Kind Free makeup foundation in the shade Rose Ivory, and also the concealer from Rimmel from the line Lasting Radiance, also in the shade Ivory. I also used my new blush from Cosmetics in the shade Seduction, and I topped it off with the Colourpop All Laced Up blush. And on my lips I have the Cosmetics matte lipstick in the shade Punk AF. For the second look, I wanted to try these more neutrally shades, so I started with the shade Moon Magic, which is very like cool toned, almost grayish brown. I used the same eyeshadow base as in the first look. Then I deepened it up with the shade Do Not Carve again. I used this shade for all my looks because it's the darkest shade and I wanted to deepen it up. As you can see, in the beginning it looks almost black and it looks really pigmented and like you're gonna get a lot of drama out of it, but then when you blend it out it's not as dramatic, and I was kind of sad about it because when I was trying to blend it into the Moon Magic shade, it kind of lost its punch and it wasn't as opaque. Then I used the shimmery shade called Urban Legend, which, as I said, is a little bit more cool toned, bronzy brown. It's not ugly shade, I'm just not really into neutrals, but I was going out that day, so I needed something a little bit more normal than I usually go for. Here you can see kind of more day appropriate neutral look. Let me know if you have this palette or if you want to try this palette. And if you've tried any other palettes from Give Me Glow, and I will definitely be happy to hear your opinion about this brand. Since there isn't any inner corner highlight, I used this palette from Shellwe makeup called Liana, and I used this very silvery, almost white shade from this palette. I think this silvery shade is really nice with this look, and I definitely will be using it again. So here's the finished look. I didn't really put any foundation or anything like that. I usually don't. I just kind of stick to eyeshadows, and I did put liquid liner or gel liner from L'Oreal, and the same mascara as before, which is the L'Oreal Pro XXL extension. I've been using this one quite a bit lately. And then I think I put a little bit of concealer. Again, it's the Rimmel Lasting Radiance in the shade Ivory. For the third look, I wanted to use these cool tone greens. So firstly, I started with the darkest shade, Do Not Carve. I wanted to see if I'm gonna be able to make it really deep. If I start with this really deep shade, sometimes if you want the colors to be as opaque as you can and to have the look as dark as you can, it's good to start with the darkest shade. So I tried it here. I don't know if it really worked. I think it still blended out kind of into a really light brown. In the first third of my crease, I used this shade Midnight Mist, which is a cool toned green, and then on my lid I used the shade Did You Hear That, which is this kind of turquoisey cool toned green. I didn't use any glitter primer or anything. I just used the shade as it is, and I used my finger, and again I used the same inner corner highlight as before, since I already kind of had this palette next to the new Hunted Pumpkin, so I decided they're gonna be friends. And again, I put the same mascara and everything, and here's how it looks. I actually kind of really like this look. I usually wear more golden or like warm toned greens, but for Halloween season I think it's better to use these cool tones, and I think when it's gonna be autumn or in the winter, I'm gonna like those cool tones a little bit more. For the fourth look, I kind of did something very similar. I just tried to make this look a little bit more blue or turquoisey, and I used a different primer. This one is from e.l.f. and I started with the shade Rotten, which is this like bluish green turquoisey shade. I used it in the first half of my crease. Then I used the shade Midnight Mist to kind of build the crease in my outer corner. And then again I used the shade Do Not Carve to deepen it up. This and the orange look are probably my favorite. To make this look a little bit more bluer, I used this shade from the Uden's Eyes palette, and I used the last shade that's kind of like a little bit bluey, turquoisey, tealy shimmer shade. And I used gel liner in my waterline from Uden's Eye. It's the shade 04. As a mascara, I used the L'Oreal Air Volume. To kind of give you my conclusion, I will definitely have to use this palette a little bit more. I think the mattes are a little bit too creamy for me. If you want to blend it out and have that more like smoky look, they kind of smudge a lot, or they create like a little bit of patchiness. I'm kind of disappointed with the shimmers. I personally like my shimmers to be a little bit more sparkly, but I understand that this is a Halloween palette, and if they were going for that kind of more cool grayish look, I guess this kind of works. I really love the oranges and the red in this palette. There isn't anything light enough to be in my inner corner, and there isn't anything deep enough to actually create that smoky eye. I think if this was smaller palette, I wouldn't have so much problem with this, but this is extremely big palette, and they could have made the pans a little bit smaller and either add 2 more shades or swap out some of these shades. Yeah, that's kind of my opinion. So yeah, that's it. I will definitely be using this palette in the autumn and around the Halloween season. I don't know if this is gonna be my favorite Halloween palette, if I'm being honest. Anyways, that's it for me. Hope you have a great day. Hope you like this video. I will see you in my next video. Bye.